from what I've heard from my sources, is the evidence for all the different crimes of the Clinton Foundation, whether it's tax evasion and so many other different crimes, is overwhelming. Even the former FBI assistant director said that they were an organized crime family. And this is a guy that, busted illegal mafias during the 80s and 90s.
Hey friends, thanks for tuning in. We're going to round out 2016 with our friend Jason Burack from Wall Street for Main Street. Jason, welcome back.
Thanks, Sean. Glad to be back. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Well, Happy New Year to you. It's right around the corner, 2017. And I got to tell you, I think we're going to see a bond market collapse in 2017. I think we're potentially going to see all hell break loose. But what do you think were some of the biggest stories of 2016? As we approach the new year, I think one of the biggest stories is Bitcoin, which is on an absolute tear, unlike gold and silver, which are perpetually manipulated lower in the paper markets. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I just put out a short video on the Wall Street for Main Street channel. I put it out last night. I was thinking about it. And, when we look at the behavior of these corrupt politicians and corrupt central bankers in many different countries, whether it's China with their currency devaluation, they have a dollar peg. And then, you could be a Chinese citizen and have cash in the bank. And then all of a sudden, your purchasing power, you've been devalued overnight or in 2 days. So you've had purchasing power stolen from you because the government decides for the greater good that this would benefit the economy, that they're going to devalue the currency, and you've had money, you've been inflated or devalued, and you've had purchasing power stolen from you. People are revolting. So even if they're not libertarian per se, they have common sense. And if they have savings, cash in the bank, they're not going to just sit there and do nothing. I don't know if these academic Keynesian PhD economists, these politicians, these central bankers actually believe they've dumbed down the people enough to the point where the people will just sit there and fully comply with whatever the politicians do. But we see the evidence that that the exact opposite is starting to happen. And I think one of the main reasons why Bitcoin has risen a lot in 2016, by the way, I thought Bitcoin had bottomed around $250. So if you read our 2015 review, 2016 preview that we released in January of 2016, you've done very well speculating on Bitcoin. But I think Bitcoin, there's just been an enormous amount of demand from populations in China, in India with their demonetization scheme, what Modi has done. Remember, we're hearing that Modi was supposed to be pro-business and Modi was supposed to be pro-gold. Instead, we have, a weird experiment going on in India where it looks like the globalists, the global elite, and these Keynesian central bankers are using India as a test case, for this war on cash, this cashless society, to see what happens with a digital economy. And India, a lot of the people in India don't necessarily have reliable electricity or internet connections. They do have phones, but not necessarily advanced smartphones. And so, we have the Indian government trying to force people into this cashless society now, the crazy tricks. So the really big demand for Bitcoin, in my opinion, why we've had a huge amount of move in the price, besides these high-frequency trading algorithms, has been because of demand increases from countries like Venezuela, which is hyperinflating. I think it's over 40,000 bolivar now for $1. That's how insane. These countries, whether it's Venezuela or Brazil, they have capital controls. They have controls on imports. So in order to survive, if you're a middle-class person in one of these countries and you have cash in the bank, you're trying to convert your currency to something where you can maybe go online to Amazon.com and buy some goods and figure out a way to get it shipped to your country just so you can survive. Sean, gold and silver were supposed to be going up like Bitcoin is, but gold and silver are just so freaking manipulated that, we don't have that right now. And we have the paper gold and silver markets now. Let me pull up my Kitco real quick. So we're under 1150 gold. We're under 16 silver now as of right now. So the miners are really back in the danger zone. The miners were primary gold and silver miners were very heavily criticized earlier in 2016 when the paper metals prices were higher for going to the market and raising cash and equity to help try and fix their balance sheets. They were very heavily criticized by many people, but had they not raised that capital, they would be looking at potentially shutting down mines quickly or going bankrupt a lot faster. So the miners can kind of keep their heads above water for a little bit longer because they've raised some capital. The ones who have raised capital are in a little bit better shape, but they're not making any free cash flow at these prices, even though they've cut the cost to the bone the last 5 years during the cyclical bear market that we had starting in 2011. So with the manipulation, we've had the technicals knocked out for a while, and we may have a consolidation for a little bit longer. But if the paper metals prices do go, the usual suspects come out, whether it's Martin Armstrong, Harry Dent, so many other people who hate gold and silver. They come out every time gold and silver have any of a correction, and gold's going below 1,000. It's going to stay there for a long time. There's demand in the real world for physical gold and silver, and the miners cannot make really any money at these prices. Very few miners can generate a profit. If we go much lower, man, the miners are just the danger zone that I'm talking about now is just going to get worse and worse, back to 2015 levels again, where in 2015 the miners were basically on the brink.
Yeah.
A lot of miners, Sean, a large chunk of them in 2016 of primary gold and silver miners were on the brink of bankruptcy, more than 20%. So they were within 6 months to 12 months of bankruptcy. So we will get back down to those levels. There are natural physical limits in the real world to how much the paper metals price can get knocked down. So in the short term, anything can happen. Maybe for a brief amount of time, we could have the paper metals price goes lower, but there will be real world limits, especially in silver, because there is a lot of silver that is not really recycled. So we have 50% of the silver market, which is used for industrial demand. Only a couple 100 million ounces of physical silver every year actually recycled. That's not a lot of the total market. Investment demand is still strong for silver. So in the silver market, the supply would just tighten up if, say, the silver price went another $1 or $2 lower. It would get to the point where the primary silver miners were just basically hemorrhaging cash again, like in 2015.
All right, well, let's talk reality. Let's talk hard numbers. I'm at usdebtclock.org, and the U.S. national debt right now sits at $19.94 trillion. We're pushing $20 trillion in stated debt. That does not count any of the unfunded liabilities. Mm-hmm. And in the lower right-hand corner, people will see that the dollar-to-silver ratio is $1,005 per ounce, and the dollar-to-gold ratio is $9,086 per ounce. In a world of reality where the bankers couldn't get away with endless criminal manipulation of the markets, do you think we'd be seeing prices in gold and silver that more accurately reflect what the USDebtClock.org is saying? $1,000 silver is probably where we should be if we're seeing $900 Bitcoin, don't you think?
Well, I don't know about $1,000 silver in the short term, but certainly triple-digit silver is realistic in the future, and that's just going to be because we're going to have problems replacing reserves of silver cheaply. So there is lots of silver available to mine in the future. The problem is the cost every 5 or 10 years to replace these reserves. Bloomberg actually ran a piece on this, Sean. I'll send it to you later and you could stick it in with the interview. But Bloomberg actually did research with 5 different charts showing that a lot of the primary gold miners have basically mined all of their reserves. So they're going to be scrambling to replace the reserves that they've been mining while the gold price has gone down from 2011 to the beginning of 2016. And so they're going to have to replace their reserves that they mine, and the cost of those reserves is going to be a lot higher than it was in the past. See, there's this assumption, and it's in the textbooks, that over the long term, commodity prices are supposed to fall. People are supposed to become more efficient. Commodities get substituted out, but gold is money. People want it for savings. So, and silver is not, a lot of it's not recycled. And the amount of silver that's used in industry, it's used in very tiny amounts, and it's very difficult to recycle it in a lot of cases. So what we're seeing now is that every 10 years or so, we pull out so much physical gold and silver out of the earth that in order to replace it with more production, the costs just keep going higher. So we have to move more uneconomic tons of rock, more basically just uneconomic ore. That's not that's basically, there's no metal in there. There's no byproduct of copper or lead or zinc, or if it's a gold mine, there's no silver byproduct there to make it a little bit more economic. So they're moving uneconomic rock, more and more of it just to get it, smaller amounts of gold. And I don't see this trend dissipating. Now I've seen articles recently about asteroid mining. Now that's going to crash the gold and silver
Yeah,
market.
that's nonsense. That asteroid mining is so that only the breakaway civilization could be mining asteroids for metals, and only the breakaway civilization would benefit from such activity. That's complete nonsense. I can't even believe that that's being spoken about seriously. But let me ask you this: did you just say that it was 40,000 bolivars to $1 right now? What was that figure you gave?
I believe it's 40,000 bolivars to $1. They're in hyperinflation
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Here's the point I want to share, because when we see a currency hyperinflate like we're seeing in Venezuela, we see silver priced in infinite numbers. Okay. For instance, if it's 40,000 bolivars to $1, that means at $16 silver, it would cost a Venezuelan more than 600,000 bolivars for 1 ounce of silver, which probably makes sense given the fact that we've heard 1 ounce of silver right now will buy 5 or 6 months of food in Venezuela. The only thing that is keeping the prices of gold and silver this artificially low in U.S. dollars is the manipulation and is the fact that the U.S. dollar is still largely seen as the world's reserve currency. But you and I both know that's changing. China's getting out of the dollar. Russians are getting out of the dollar. Both countries are getting into gold. Look, I spoke with an executive of a mining company recently who is very freaked out at sub 1165 gold. Your point is well taken. These miners will not survive if we see sub $1,000 gold for very darn long. And the only way that happens is through this endless criminal manipulation. And that's not hyperbole. Look at the UBS, Deutsche Bank emails. These people laugh at us as they gut the silver market through their paper games. It's absolutely disgusting. And the only thing that will save us, Jason, is a return to rule of law. But I don't see these guys going to jail anytime soon. Do you?
No, unfortunately not. They're like the bankers. A lot of them are the protected class, like Hillary Clinton. The Clinton Foundation is basically as they're actually into more businesses making profits all over the globe than most mafias. So most drug cartels or mafias or organized crime syndicates. I mean, Clinton Foundation is into drug dealing, trafficking, arms deals. They commit treason in governments, buy off politicians. So if you can think of any type of felony business that's totally immoral but can make a lot of profit that a mafia or criminal crime syndicate is doing, the Clinton Foundation is involved in it somewhere on the globe.
Yeah, that's right.
Money laundering.
Well, let me support you on that. You're absolutely right about the Clinton Foundation. And if anybody wants to dig into the real goods about how widespread this corruption is within our government, including the Clinton Foundation, watch the George Webb series of videos on YouTube called Where is Eric Braverman? Eric Braverman, the former CEO of the Clinton Foundation, has now been missing for some 65 days. No one knows where he is. Rumors are he's either fled to Russia or he's under FBI protection because he fears for his life given the things he found out about the Clinton Foundation. So very important series. Where is Eric Braverman, the former Clinton Foundation CEO?
It's the largest global charity fraud. They're probably the largest global organized crime unit, crime syndicate in the entire world. They can topple governments, many different governments. I mean, they're involved in almost any single illegitimate, illegal, criminal business that's profitable. So they've taken $100 million from the Australian government that was supposed to go for AIDS and HIV drugs for the poor Africans that the Australian government was giving out of charity, and the Clintons basically bought drugs from an Indian drug manufacturer they knew that wouldn't work, and they sold bad drugs they knew that wouldn't work into the African market, and they pocketed it. So, I mean, this is, the illicit activities that they will do. The Clinton Foundation will do literally any type of illegal activity in order to make money if the profit's high enough. And, they're above the law right now. So hopefully Trump will come in and drain the swamp, and I think the problem is not necessarily the lower-level FBI agents. I think the problem is scumbags like Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder at the top of the DOJ, scumbags like James Comey, who was a lawyer for the military-industrial complex and also Big Oil before he moved into the FBI. So I think that's the problem, because I think, from what I've heard from my sources, is the evidence for all the different crimes of the Clinton Foundation, whether it's tax evasion and so many other different crimes, is overwhelming. And, anyone in the right, even the former FBI assistant director said that they're an organized crime family. And this is a guy that, busted illegal mafias during the 80s and 90s. But, back to the gold and silver miners, these guys, a lot of them are aware that the gold and silver are manipulated. They don't have a backbone. They're scared. Now that we have the evidence of the Deutsche Bank with the communications on top of the other evidence that was available for gold and silver manipulation, if I was a gold... What?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. If I was a gold and silver mining company and I was, a middle company or a big company and I had some cash flow, I would be putting money into a class action lawsuit. And yes, class action lawsuit in the United States, the court system is very slow here, but 2 or 3 years down the line, this is gonna send the banks a message that they got to stop doing this. So the banks would either have to settle or get out of the manipulation game or drastically cut it back. And I don't see that behavior being done right now, unfortunately. Sean, the Silver Institute and the World Gold Council, these guys are supposed to be doing good, independent, objective research on supply and demand for the gold and silver market, and these industry trade groups are supposed to be protecting the miners from things like this manipulation, so they should be the ones who are quarterbacking and coordinating this class action lawsuit that the miners should be doing. And yet I see none of this coming out from the Silver Institute or the World Gold Council, because, there's a lot of research and evidence that the World Gold Council, they do incredibly poor research for the gold market. It's basically intentional. Kuz Jansen and others have shown this, along with my friend Derek Dubin, that the World Gold Council's research is very poor. But, their motives are not there to benefit the actual primary gold and silver miners, in my opinion. But I think the miners, a lot of them are really scared of the bankers. A lot of them don't really believe in gold and silver long term. They don't understand their money. Either they don't understand their money or they don't care that their money. They see it as just a commodity. They see it as a high-paying job. A lot of them owe a lot of debt to the banks. So they're worried if they start talking about the manipulation, the bankers will just get them and the rest of their managers or board of directors fired and replace them with people who won't talk about the manipulation and will do basically whatever the bankers say.
Yeah, but do you think we really have 2 or 3 years left? You mentioned a class action lawsuit. The system runs slowly, 3 years. Do you think there's 3 years of this nonsense left? Do you think the dollar, given The Economist magazine and its prediction of a new currency, a global currency in 2018, how long the dollar is in the tooth, how we see the bonds selling off, the bond market bubble is bursting, do you honestly see 3 years left in this game?
Last year I said there was 2 or 3 years left. So I thought the election would happen, and then I thought things would start to unravel. So we have a lot of plates spinning right now. I've talked about how we're in an economic minefield. So, the pension fund crisis here in the United States is accelerating very rapidly. There was actually a run on a pension fund last month in Dallas, Texas, for retired police officers. They a bunch of them retired early and pulled out hundreds of millions of dollars, and they had to freeze the fund. A lot of pension funds are 4 to 7 times unfunded, so I'm not sure what the elites are going to decide to do about that, if there's going to be a bailout or they're going to intentionally try to prop up all the asset markets higher to do that, or maybe they raise the interest rates a token amount to keep the pension funds temporarily solvent. So, look at the dystopian world we have now. Okay, so we have the dollar index, despite the Federal Reserve increasing their balance sheet from $800 billion to $4 trillion, the dollar index is now at a 14-year high, which is just ridiculous. We have the Dow at 20,000, almost at 20,000. We have asset markets which are insanely high. The Bank of Japan was the largest buyer of Japanese stocks. That's hardly ever talked about by the mainstream media. The fake news mainstream media, by the way, which is focused on, their agenda of propping up asset markets and choosing their certain political candidates. So, to try to pick, I don't think one thing I've tried to stress to my listeners on my channel, and hopefully you have on yours, is we should not try to pick the exact date and time that this collapse will happen. So, they could keep things going for a couple more years, defy gravity. There are a lot of plates spinning, though, that they've had to keep spinning. So, this European banking crisis, mathematically, all these European banks are basically insolvent, and here we are seeing, as an example of that, these current events that are coming out saying, the Italian banks only need about 20 billion euros. We had a press release from the Federal Reserve a couple weeks ago. I did a short video on that, saying that they ran the numbers, and U.S. and European banks only need about 70 billion in capital, but they're not going to give out any more overt bailouts that the banks are going to have to sell bank stocks and they're going to have to sell long-term debt. Well, if they're not, if the central banks aren't going to directly buy them, who's going to be buying these bank stocks that the banks need to raise to stay phony solvent, and who's going to be forced to buy these bank debt? So this sounds to me like one of those hidden bail-ins. I mean, bailouts and bail-ins, Sean, are two sides of the same coin. The elites like to use them in different capacity and switch off. So this is all part of totalitarian government, with devaluing currencies, forcing people into certain asset classes, forcing people with certain tax policies to do what they want to do. It looks like there's about $20 trillion left in U.S. assets in 401ks and IRAs. I've talked in the past about how I think, due to national security reasons, the U.S. government in the next 5 to 10 years is going to force U.S. citizens to put initially it'll be a very small amount. It'll be maybe 1 or 2% of all your retirement account in 401k or IRA into U.S. Treasuries. It looks like, Sean, based on that Federal Reserve press release, and I put a link to it in that short video. You can I'll send it to you if you want to show it to your listeners. But it looks like, in addition to buying U.S. Treasuries for national security, citizens in certain countries, whether you're European, maybe if you're a German citizen, maybe then you're going to be forced to put a certain percentage of your retirement account into Deutsche Bank stock or Deutsche Bank bonds, in addition to maybe other government bonds. And if you're an American citizen, maybe you have to buy a certain percentage, tiny percentage at first, and it'll be gradually increased, because this is how the elites like to do it. They like to layer things on, and then they ratchet it up, and then if the people, bitch and threaten pitchforks, they take a break. And then they wait it out a little bit, and then it's right back to the agenda.
Right.
So, with Trump winning the election recently, kind of this cashless society that Ken Rogoff and Larry Summers and the other, Democrat scumbags that are in academia and also at the Federal Reserve, that they want, it looks like Trump may push that back. But make no mistake, they're not going to give up on it. They may have to wait another 4 years or 8 years to start implementing the plan again, but this is what these evil people without morals want, to engineer their dystopian type of society.
Yeah, this is the perfect segue to my final question for you. One observation, though, first. I would just call everyone's attention to an article that I posted at the top of SGT Report on Monday night, Tuesday morning. Evidence is that Angela Merkel is intentionally allowing ISIS to operate in the EU. It's from Reddit over at the Donald subreddit. Pleading the Yif is the author, and it's a gripping article providing much proof of Angela Merkel's involvement in what's going on with ISIS and with the New World Order. And of course, it would stand to reason then that Angela Merkel would force her own citizens into Deutsche Bank bonds. The bankers run the whole show, as you know, and here's my final question for you, Jason. We saw Obama a week ago sign the Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act into law. It's S2943, and buried within that National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017 is H.R. 5181, a bill to implement the U.S. very own de facto Ministry of Truth. Has been quietly introduced in Congress. According to Zero Hedge, the Countering Information Warfare Act of 2016, it was introduced in March. It's now been signed into law on the back of this other bill, and it's just absolute tyranny on steroids. And I guess my question for you, Jason, is this. The powers that be thought Hillary Clinton was going to be their next puppet in the White House. She did not win. I think they were going to use this bill to dismantle every critic of Clinton when she became the criminal in chief. She's not going to the White House now, thank God. She's now politically impotent. Since Donald Trump is going in, can he dismantle this? Will he dismantle it, or will he use it to further his own power?
I think it's too early on Trump. I think Trump is mostly, as of right now, focused on trying to fix the economy and create jobs. So, yes, we do have the debt problem, like you mentioned, and the bond market, since Trump won the election, the bond market has, the 10-year Treasury note has doubled in only 6 months. So we've had two big moves up with Donald Trump winning the election, and then also the Federal Reserve's another token interest rate increase of 25 basis points, and that has really spooked the bond market. I think the bond market is starting to really worry about Trump's potential spending programs on infrastructure, defense, and potentially building a wall. That we could get really bad. When I look at this problem, Sean, going forward economically, if Trump is successful in fixing the economy, that would increase the velocity of money in the real economy, which would increase inflation a lot faster than most people think. But if Trump is not successful in fixing the real economy and creating jobs, that would still potentially leave us with a lot more debt. It would accelerate the debt problem. So either way I look at this, I see a lot worse stagflation going forward. Unfortunately, I see worsening stagflation as the best case scenario. I think it's too early to tell what Trump will do with the rest of his policies. Obama used a ton of executive orders. It was record-setting. And Obama, now the hypocrite Obama is, he's saying Trump shouldn't use them. But we'll see what Trump does. I'm cautiously optimistic that Trump will be able to cut red tape and make things a little bit better for small business and entrepreneurs in the U.S. He is bringing in large corporate guys, but I think these guys have the business savvy to they realize the economy is not doing as well as the government has been saying. I think a lot of his team has record amounts of business experience, so the potential is there for them to help the real economy. The problem is the mess that Trump has inherited was so huge. We have Janet Yellen lying about how good she was giving a speech to college graduating seniors, talking about they're going to be looking for jobs in a great economy. It's just totally ridiculous, the bullshit that these totally delusional that the people in power, the elites, believe. So I don't know what's going to happen with that law, but yeah, Hillary Clinton would have been a lot worse for people like you and me. But the people in power, Sean, they've been planning this for a very long time. This started on whether it was government schools, brainwashing at a young age with the mainstream media. They've been doing this on college campuses now to the point where, a lot of these progressive social justice warrior snowflakes, they can't hear anyone's other opinion. They have to go cry in a corner, and they have to go to get some crayons and coloring books. They have to have a day off from school in a safe zone now.
Yeah.
So, and they can't have any critical thinking or hear the other side's opinion. You're automatically racist or sexist or something else. You're automatically labeled just for trying to poke a hole in their argument. Now, it's really dystopian. The American founders, when they founded this country, they wanted healthy argument. They wanted dissent. They wanted a independent, critically thinking group of citizens that would try to figure out what was the best thing for themselves and for their country and for their state. And, that's not what we have now. We have a bunch of people that are brainwashed people in the United States. And, yes, they have a couple different college degrees, but, they have no common sense. And they all think basically a certain way. And so they're pro, central planning. They're pro, U.S. foreign policy this way, for a certain way, for U.S. empire. And
they're anti-constitution. Congress shall make no law. Congress shall make no law. And yet, what did they do as it relates to this, right? According to Zero Hedge, I'll read this as we round this out. Long before the fake news meme became a daily topic of extensive conversation on such discredited mainstream portals as CNN and Washington Post, H.R. 5181 would task the Secretary of State with coordinating the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and the Broadcasting Board of Governors to establish a Center for Information Analysis and Response, which will pinpoint sources of disinformation, analyze data, and in true dystopic manner, a word you love, they wrote it, I'll use it, dystopic, in true dystopic manner, develop and disseminate fact-based narratives to counter effrontery propaganda. Propaganda, they want to call everything that we talk about, gold, silver, child sex trafficking, corruption by the big banks, criminal banks, collusion between Deutsche Bank and UBS and the paper, silver, and gold markets. To the establishment, it's all propaganda. And once they dismantle the true news media out there, what will be left? The sheeple will only get their news from the State Department talking heads at CNN, Washington Post, and New York Times. That's the most dystopian future I can think of, Jason.
Yep, yeah, it is. And to give you some examples of how they're already doing it, I don't know about you, but in the last 3 or 4 months, our YouTube views have been cut in half. So the new YouTube algorithm that Google or Alphabet or whatever the hell their name is now, Don't Be Evil, is using, it's cut our views in half. So, videos that we used to get more than double the views on are down a lot. So I noticed this in our analytics. And, on friends' threads, when they're still discussing the election or talking about Donald Trump, if I mention the Clinton Foundation and post it on a friend's thread or wall, like in a post, Facebook's algorithm, man, is deleting it. It's gone. So 5 minutes later, man, I checked on different friends, whether they're Republican or Democrat, and posted about the Clinton Foundation. I don't think all these different friends are going through deleting individually what I say. Facebook is just screening it and deleting it now.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Yep, no, we've seen the same thing. Google's changing the algorithm so that quote-unquote fake news does not come up in the results at all.
From our perspective, there should just be no situation in which fake news gets distributed.
Their original algorithm tweak was to make it come up after the mainstream media returns, so you'd have to dig to the second or third page to get these results. Now they're going to start filtering out fake news or alternative news returns altogether. That's the brave new world we're headed into, and it's very, very disturbing. If Donald Trump wants to stand for liberty, and my God, he got a lot of support from the Breitbart folks, as you well know, which is an enemy of the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation, and is happily labeled as a fake news site. He needs to defend those of us in the alt media. He needs to dismantle H.R. 5181, the most Orwellian bill of certainly the last 12 months. Our guest has been Jason Burack from Wall Street for Main Street, and I would say this as it relates to your videos and mine on YouTube, Jason. The tip for listeners is there's a little bell, apparently. If you look at our logos on our channels, you need to go to that little bell and click it. That's to get alerts. You need to get those alerts so that you know when we post a new video. YouTube's making it harder and harder for folks to get our content. So click that bell, and then you should be alerted when Jason or I post a new video. Jason, tell people about your website too, will you?
Sure. We have the wallstreetformainstreet.com website. We are going to start working in the next couple weeks on our 2016 review, 2017 preview. There will be stock picks in there, so if your listeners want to give us their email, if we do decide to leave YouTube because, we are being destroyed on there with our views and start posting in alternative areas, we may have to look for alternative places to post our content if YouTube is going to totally destroy us, unfortunately. So I think your listeners, besides just the YouTube bell, they should also give us their email address because, we're going to start having to make insurance or contingency plans now, whether it's Twitter and going to Gab AI, which I'm on now, or, any backups to YouTube. The big technology people, they pick which side they're on.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thanks in advance for your support. Thanks for supporting us at sgtreport.com, thephaser.com, and thelibertymill.com, where we try to bring you real news, true news, the alternative to the corporate Mockingbird horror media. We bring you the real news 24/7. We hope you all have a wonderful week ahead. Jason, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Happy New Year, Sean.
Yes, and Happy New Year to everyone. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
I think that we just don't realize what psychopaths these people are. Psychopaths have a known phenomenon called duper's delight. They love to push in their victim's face what they're doing and be lying about it and get away with it.